Hi, welcome to the new view. Hey, everybody. We're going to start with the topic of the trucker convoy. Who wants to start in?
It's very inspiring.
Yeah, what were you feeling about it? You were watching it a lot, so have we.
Yeah, so I keep getting choked up over these things. They're so brave because they could go to jail, they could freeze to death in their cabs, they've got their kids with them. It's very like the American Revolution, it seems to me. They're really putting their lives on the line. Oh, and they could get $100,000 fine, I saw.
I love the clarity that they're speaking with. It's just been quite moving. That they're just saying, we want to meet with the authorities. We want to meet. We want to discuss this. We have doctors here with us, and we want to talk with you. We want to compare facts, and it's just very reasonable. Yet, it's just extraordinary how they're being portrayed by Trudeau, Mr. Global, as, you know, racists and Nazis, and I can't think of all the other things, but they're just a fringe minority, and it's just really, it is really inspiring.
And it's about the mandates, not just not just what's being mandated.
Yeah, it's everything.
It's the idea that they can impose mandates with an executive order, which they can't. I mean, what happened to the Bill of Rights? Or, you know, in the US Bill of Rights, they have their equivalent. Yeah.
It's also triggering similar kinds of things, activities in different parts of the world now, which, you know, this is a shot heard around the world.
Yes.
I think that's a good way to frame it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. It's so exciting because years and years ago, I realized that we needed medical freedom, and my spiritual teacher at the time made mention that there was going to come a time in which there was going to be a big battle between those of natural health and medical freedom and the establishment, and that it was going to come to a head, and we were going to win. The natural health movement was going to win. And that would indicate that the new reality, the new world, the new age was here. And that was like 30 years ago. And I've been like waiting and waiting and waiting because I thought it was going to only be happening in the US. But now I'm seeing that it has to happen globally.
Yeah.
And because the Canadians, the least likely people to be fierce and stand up and holler and do anything, are actually taking the lead here. I mean, I am just so excited. I just get chills. And one of you posted this talk by Trisha Lindsay, the civil rights lawyer woman.
Oh, yeah.
And talking about this and talking about the truckers and talking about medical freedom. And I swear, I mean, I was like, yeah, I'm born again. Yeah, she's like the best preacher, you know, Martin Luther King reincarnated, you know.
Yeah, I posted that and I didn't know her name. It's Trisha Lindsay.
Lindsay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, she's amazing. And I sent that to our group here in Ecuador because President Lasso just returned from China with 2.5 million jabs for 3- and 4-year-old children. And I thought her message, I sent it to our team here and with all caps saying, you must watch this. You know, we can pull some of the elements that she's raised in her talk, you know, because it's all really germane to protecting everyone, but also as in particular the children. And it's just criminal what they're proposing.
Carol's hand. Carol.
Well, I've been watching this and at the same time participating to some degree because there's so much organizing going on here in the Bay Area. Dr. David Martin spoke out about Trudeau and how he's not going to be able to back off and accede to the truckers' demands. And today, actually, I have to leave early because we're going to be presenting David Martin's list of all the criminal felonies at the county courthouses. And I've already sent it to the attorney generals in 37 states, but there's a national effort to take it to the county courthouses today. There's also an effort to mobilize for the US convoy. So people are all gathering and they've planned all these elaborate routes to converge on Washington, DC. So they're doing a similar to the Defeat the Mandates big giant rally in Washington, DC and Southern California on March 5th. And I was gone this weekend and I got home to a whole bunch of phone calls, and one was, oh, Carol, can you help me organize a rally at the Canadian consulate on Tuesday in support of the truckers? And we have another rally on Tuesday in San Francisco. So it's just like an insanely busy day. And then David Martin and his wife, Kim, are going to be at the Church of Glad Tidings this weekend. And they're doing a workshop on, preparing it's for, what's going to happen next when this thing comes crumbling down, how to rebuild society. So I'm signed up to go to participate in that.
I'm just so
It's
excited.
like
I'm just so
such
excited.
a busy week. and also, yeah, and then also I'm also working, the reason I was late too, the speech, because we're challenging the narrative, looking at the collapse of empire on Wednesday. So it's that online Zoom meeting. I think I invited you all to participate in. So I'm just
in my
putting
book.
my eyeballs and organizing and getting out there.
Thank you.
Great work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Back to like nobody expected it would be truckers in Canada. That's the last scenario, but there it is. It's just this marvelous surprise. And then to see the masses coming out in Australia, and Australia has been so shut down, and the New Zealand also, and to see that this just rallying everybody to have the courage to have their voice and starting to see how huge this thing really is. So I would like to hear, like, it's seen by the mainstream or legacy media. These are our far right people, and what's going there. I mean, we know it's all across, but there's still that impression. Ellen.
So I heard Catherine Austin Fitts say that these are basically farmers, that the farmers, or she's talking about the American truckers. She said, I don't know Canadian truckers, but I know American truckers. And she said, these are the small farmers that got moved off their land. They got bought out, or, how they've all got pressured, and they want their sovereignty. They want to be independent. And so they've gone into trucking because they can be their own business. So I thought that was quite inspiring. It's the American dream yet again, even if you have to take to your truck instead of have your own land.
I came across Evangelos Valianatos. He's a Greek guy who worked for the EPA. He saw a lot of problems with the EPA. He's done a lot of good writing, and he says that democracy was founded by the small farmers of Greece. It came out of observing it came out of the observation of how the small farmers planned and interacted and ruled themselves to make all their cooperation work very well. And it's not, we think the philosophers invented democracy. It's the small farmers coming out of Greece. This is a Greek guy talking, and that's how democracy was formed. So Jefferson and others absolutely is based on well-distributed land, small farms, and so on, to have a real bottom-up democracy of the people, which we've lost a long time ago. Who's next on the truckers topic?
It's got to be from the bottom up. We can't make this change from the top down, because the top is too entrenched.
That's maybe why the left is not supporting it, because the left tends to be big government. So anything that looks from the real bottom, from the real working people, looks like, oh, that's the right. But it is the right in a sense that genuine conservative Republicans are for small government, and they also for small business. And there's a split in both those parties around, of course, the corporate rule system and the people rule system. Ellen.
Yeah, and I don't think you can even call it Democrats versus Republicans, because both are top down in government, and yet they're bottom up. I mean, there's a strong populist movement in both, or certainly the Democrats used to be the truckers, they used to be the workers, but the problem is our whole democratic system is ruled by big money and the lobbyists. And in order to get elected, you have to respond to the lobbyists, and they're the ones that pretty much write the legislation these days.
Mhm. So, Norie, and then we're going to move on to our other topic, which is the Fuelmich, the Nuremberg 2 trials. Norie.
Actually, I was going to segue into the conversation about economics, of the new economics, if that's okay. Because I really, if we're talking about bottom up, and I totally 1,000,000% agree, then we have to look at the bottom up economics that's going to empower every human being. Now, here's an interesting, I've been watching quite a bit recently about the Great Reset, and I just watched a long thing with Jeff Brown. I don't know if you guys know, you ladies know Jeff Brown. He's a financial analyst. He gives advice on where the economy is going. And he lays out how the elites are moving toward bringing in something we all know about, this the digital dollar, okay? And that would be controlled by the Federal Reserve and then and by the governments. And that basically he's giving all these warnings about it, and then he's saying, well, you too can profit from this. And I mean, I got really slammed with Catherine Austin Fitts' statement about how what we really need to stop building the prison cage. Okay, so, but I do see that, you know, there's a momentum going in this direction to digitalize the dollar. Catherine, of course, calls for Cash Friday, where you just use cash. And I think there are a lot of experiments going on all over the world in local currencies, whether it's local currencies or local transaction systems, exchange systems. And all of that I think is very, very interesting. And I really think we need to be thinking about, and this is why I wanted this, why I tagged on to both Ginger and Ellen in saying, I think this really needs to be unpacked, because I want to bring out a couple of things that I've been thinking about for a long time. One of them is
Okay,
that,
can we have Ellen put in for her hand up now, and then I want 2 cents, and then go back to Norie. How about that?
Okay, because I can't stay for the whole thing,
Yeah,
sorry.
I know.
So I would like to put in a plug for the Fed. I mean, I've written whole books against the Fed, so obviously I know the downsides here. But, and you probably don't listen to Tom Luongo, and I can't even recommend him because he swears a lot. But he points out that it's really well, in fact, Michael Hudson also, his latest article is that our real enemy is Europe. Well, anyway, so Tom Luongo points out that the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset are all the old European money. You know, it's, I mean, you could say Rothschilds or whatever, but anyway, it's the old European money, the kings and queens and all that stuff. And that the Fed, our Fed, is not going along with it. And that's, you could see that when Jerome Powell stood up to Christine Lagarde when she was saying that the banks, it's the responsibility of the banks to, you know, like, don't fund oil or something like that. And he said, well, that's like not within our mandate. Our mandate is to, you know, full employment and to moderate the money supply. And anyway, so, and she got very upset and said, no, you have to do it. You know, in other words, you have to go along with the Agenda 2030. And then in, I think, June of last year, the Fed raised the repo rate on their standing repo facility to 0.25%, which sounds like nothing, but they have negative rates in Europe. So that brought all the European money that was invested in Europe, they all came in droves to the dollar. So that hurt the euro, and the euro is going down anyway because it's too tight of a system. You know, they don't, you actually need, you actually need an elastic currency, which I'm discovering more and more now that we've spent 10 years trying to get these public banks set up. You clearly do need a deep, you know, a backstop. You need a source of liquidity, and that's the good of a central bank. Certainly, if you're going to set up public banks, you need it. I could go into that more, but I don't want to take up everybody's time. But anyway, I think we should. So my latest article, I was saying how they could actually get money into Main Street. They think they can't, but they can. And the way it was, the way the Federal Reserve Act was written originally, the discount window was supposed to be to discount commercial paper, which meant the promissory notes of companies, like local businesses. So anyway, it seems to me, even though we know that the Fed is really defending Wall Street, and that's why they're not going along with the whole thing, even so, they're not buying into the Great Reset, which I think is good.
Okay, I see it as maybe more like a battle between elite rule, different sections of the elite. But my 2 cents right here is I've been in conversations with Tom Greco, who's written a lot about and worked with alternative very local currencies going from the federal level down to super local. So I just put together a little short piece for our Baltimore project on an alternative, a proposal for an alternative currency for Baltimore. I could send that out on the KPASA list. So Norie.
Yeah, great. That's great, Alanna. That I look forward to reading that. And Ellen, I'm not in disagreement with a lot of what you're saying. The key thing is who controls the Fed.
Mhm.
Okay? And getting really, really clear on what kind of human beings do we want to become and what kind of world do we want to create? Because until we get really clear on that, then we're very vulnerable to having the system just jerked away and managed by people who are doing it for their own very narrow self-interest. And so one of the things that I think we really need to keep in mind.
We'll get to Ellen next, but let Norie finish.
Could I finish this? This is a piece I was leading with before, but
yeah.
What we've moved from from money being hard, dense stuff, a commodity, to becoming paper representing a commodity, and now it's digital, that it doesn't even exist. It's blips on a computer screen, and it's infinitely creatable, okay? And money behaves very, very differently from commodity. Electronic money, digital money is very, very different because 1, it's infinitely creatable, and 2, most money is exchanged for other forms of money. So you have dollars buying Deutschmarks buying yen, and so forth. And in the digital world, that's gone asymptotic in terms of the amount of money that's at play in the system, okay? So, and also when I remember telling this to Hazel Henderson just before she gave a keynote, and she used my example in her keynote, this was 30 years ago, but it was, I sell you a pen, you have the pen, I have the money. I sell you a piece of information, you have the information and I have the money. You bought that information because you have another piece of information I don't even know about that my piece fits really well with to make a new piece of information. And I go, oh my God, that was absolutely brilliant. I'll buy that new piece of information back from you because I have another piece you didn't know about. So what we're doing is we're building what I call sort of informally info widgets. And info widgets build out into stories and descriptions, which are stories, and they build out into strategies or games. And so what we're doing, we want to sort of get in front, if we're going to get in front of the pack, we need to create the big story and the big game that we're all playing, which is, of course, what a lot of my work has been about. And so the money system, we want to think about how do we use the money system? How do we design the money system so that it supports and nurtures the full development of human beings so that we have, as Buckminster Fuller said, 100% successful humanity. And we have a vision of what we want to create together so that we start moving together using our amazing capabilities as human beings to build this. And that I see is what we need to design fairly quickly. And I think we have what it takes. I mean, this is something I think a lot of us have been thinking about for a long time, and that we now need to pull those pieces together. And that is the theme after this summit that we're doing for Tip the Global Domino for Creating Heaven on Earth. The next one's going to be on it's going to be on super health. And then the one after that's going to be on the new money system and new economy. So I really think, though, we need to be focusing more on this new design so that we're ready when the big reset comes and say,
Yeah.
hey, guess what? We want the great people's reset.
Okay, I'm gonna take this to the ground real quick and then back to Ellen. This
I
week
gotta
have-
go. I'm sorry.
Okay, my
I'll
dear, to
carry
be
on next
continued
week.
with you next week.
Great seeing
Have a
you
good
all.
rest of your day.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye.
so,
Bye.
bye. I just had a meeting. My team had a meeting with grassroots activists working in the poorest of the poor communities in the poor country, the poor city of Baltimore. It's a distressed city, and this is this distressed of a distressed city. And there are people who they've managed to own a little house and they can't pay their taxes. And they're trying to SOS get it so that at least they're not losing more land. Now, what happens is when you have the infinite currency, you have infinite purchasing capacity in some hands. And then when they decide to use their digital currency, whatever kind they have it stashed as, to buy land. So now this poor community is concerned. BlackRock, as we know, is buying up lots of housing and lots of land. What do we do when BlackRock keeps buying up our housing? And BlackRock's the top in the world of wealthy banks and corporations. It's just towards the end of the monopoly game. So we must connect money with the land problem. The information widgets, they are absolutely infinite. We should have complete expansion on a mental and a spiritual realm. Those are limitless levels. They should be totally free. ID as free as possible. It's when it hits the ground, the land and resources, labor on land, housing, food, water. That is where the money has absolutely got to connect to have a fair society. So I tend to, at this point, distrust all centralization of money and power. And I want to get our local communities really working in the area of land, money, and taxes. And then to build it from the bottom up on the basis of fair rights to land, equitable money, fair taxes. So go ahead. Is that Norie next or somebody? Okay, Norie.
Well, yes, I totally agree with you because we do have to make that distinction between which things are limited and tangible assets and which things are infinite. And we also need to look at, I believe we need to go for universal, what I call universal super health, because we really need to be fully operating effective human beings if we're going to even believe that this is possible. You know, and so one of the things, you know the name Bernard Lietaer, right? Bernard came down here and visited with us for 10 days in Ecuador a couple of years before he died. And he hired me to edit a book that he wrote in German. And I think it was called Mysterium Geld in German. And anyway, one of the interesting features that he found was that the most successful periods of human history were when we had two currency systems. And that may, you know, match up with what you're talking about, Alanna, although it would be different now because one of the currency systems would be this digital infinite, you know, thing that operates under different principles. But back then, it was the gold coins were used, for example, for doing large land transactions or international transactions. And they used, for example, in the Middle Ages, there was a period of about 2.5 centuries when they used something that was called brachtheaten, which was cheap sort of silver coinage that was, you know, rather crudely stamped. And then and this used a Demirage feature of that every few years or whenever a new ruler came in, they would have all the coinage turned in, melted down, and then redistribute it, having taken a bit of the silver to pay for this reminting process. And I'm sure that some of it went into the local rulers' coffers. But the idea of that is it makes it like a hot potato. You don't want to be holding the brachtheaten when the new ruler comes in or when, and so the velocity of money moved much more quickly through the system because people were trying to use it before the value went down. And I think that's a very interesting concept. And then there are also things like the tally sticks that I think need to be revisited because, you know, look, if we have digital money at any point there can be, I've recently read a book about the secret war of cyber, the secret history of cyber warfare, which is very interesting.
Okay, can
And
does anybody else, I don't want one person to go into lecture style. We got to keep a hot potato going here in our talk. Does anybody else want to input into that? She mentioned Demirage, you know, like it makes the currency worth less over time, so it keeps transacting. My problem with Demirage is, how do I save for my old age? I want to have savings.
Exactly what I was going to
I
say.
can save for my old age, I can save to buy my house, whatever. So Ginger,
no,
did
but,
you have?
Demirage, you're busy buying things and improving things, using your money to improve your physical, putting in irrigation systems, windmills, granaries. You're using the money because it will decline in value, and so you're using it for real things rather than hoarding it. That's the original idea of the Demirage.
Okay, but like, say I've done that. Now I'm 80 years old and I want to lay back and I want to save and live off of my savings for a while. But Ginger, did you have input?
Yeah, that was exactly what I was wanting to say, because I've been really reading up on this whole Demirage idea in several different locations. And I can see how it can work to stimulate the economy, but there's got to be something. There's got to be an option. You cannot always be super engaged. You can't, I'm a hermit. I don't really want to be always constantly out there doing exchange and so on. So I like hiding out in my forest here and doing what I like to do. And I want to have a time when I don't have to work even. I don't know how to remedy that, because, we're also talking about this whole concept of the commons, which in a sense satisfied some of that issue. When there was the commons, it wasn't this whole thing like all the rentiers have to, you have to constantly work to survive and so on. And so whatever system comes in the future, I don't want this system to be something where you have to constantly do stuff.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think, Carol? Do you want to input? Carol's looked at money a lot too.
Yeah, actually, I think David Martin has been predicting the end of Social Security and that we're going to have this massive problem when all of a sudden there's like 60, 70 million people and their pension funds have been stolen. And I think that's already happened in Europe too.
Yeah,
so you have this huge societal crisis where people who had been saving away religiously for how many decades and thought that they would have a pension all of a sudden discovered that there's nothing left. And he's predicting this, and actually
Really?
the workshop that I'm going to go to, he sort of looks at, okay, we know that this is coming. We have, 5 or 6 years to prepare for it, to gear up for it. So what do we do in the meantime so that we can function, nobody's going to starve, and it's not going to be a total disaster in 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
But I do think that is the challenge that we face is people have gone along with this horrific debt-based system, which concentrates money and wealth for so many decades. And I keep expecting it to collapse, and it hasn't, because there hasn't been an alternative. And what we do need to do is try to create the alternatives which are viable so that people can shift their money out of doing the horribly destructive things and doing things that are genuinely productive. Like, well, the whole Demirage feature, it became really famous in Austria when the town was experiencing dire poverty and all these problems, and it was spent by the government to people to get public works done, and it completely revitalized the town because everybody was spending it before they had to pay the taxes on it, and investing in things that created business. So if we had vibrant local currencies, that would help, revitalize things. But unfortunately, we've had the exact opposite with the pandemic. It's absolutely, totally shut down the local businesses and everything's been siphoned up by the super rich who are buying up everything else and trying to impoverish the bulk of humanity. So the only way we're going to overcome this is if we can agree and take out our power at the local level.
I
Great,
agree.
so let's do, okay, Ginger, and then did Norie want to come back in? And then I think we should wrap up the recording part.
Okay. I agree very, very strongly there, because the thing that's the most critical, I think, in this whole shift and so on, is that people have to be responsible. And the thing is that the neoliberal thing is you get to a high enough level, you don't have to be responsible for any impact or damage that you do, you know? And so, yes, it has to become local, it has to become smaller. We have to decentralize in a sense. And I also think that somehow or another, a central bank would interfere with a lot of this decentralization. So having two types of currency, like described before, would probably be very, very effective. What I'm concerned about is that there is when you get along, when you have a system like Demirage or whatever, a local currency system, somebody's got to facilitate it. And if some people are irresponsible, somebody's got to call them out. The people have got to call them out. It means that people have got to be really engaged. This was something I saw in Occupy. And Occupy, everybody got engaged. And even in the hippie area, there was the Rainbow Tribe, and they would go out and they would play in the woods and so on, and they'd come, and the local authorities, oh gosh, we got to get rid of these hippies, but they never could find any leader because there was none. You know, when you get out of the top-down matrix, out of the dominators, and it becomes a free system, then it really becomes you being responsible and interactive for yourself, and that everybody else looking at you, there's a social
Pressure, peer pressure on them.
pressure for you to be responsible and so on, which right now we don't have that social pressure for people at the top. They can be totally distant from any kind of criticism, as we've noticed throughout all of this whole thing. So the response, so if any of you have any ideas or how to really engage people in a vision in which they can be responsible, but which also they can, because people want a system from which they can benefit and that they can feel safe. Okay. So that's just going to take a lot of negotiation, but if you have ideas, please share.
Well, assuming responsibility is certainly a key, and it is real important to even be empowered enough to assume responsibility is a big question. Norie, do you want to wrap us up?
You know, I lived in Japan 4 years, and this was a country with almost no resources, and they imported at that time 97% of all their resources from outside. They had half the population of the United States crammed into an area 1/5 the size of California. And what I discovered was that people were highly telepathic. And because of, I mean, I discovered that about a year into living there, when I suddenly found myself in what I've called the Japanese room. And I was doing it too. And things happened because people were looking, they were really working to feed each other across the table. I mean, it was really, it was a way of living that I really think we can learn a lot from, and that when we have effective communities here and groupings here, it's because we're really, I don't know, I'm one of 5 children, and in my house, in my growing up, we also did that, you know, that each person had tasks to do, and it wasn't always perfect, but you know, you kind of, you saw that mama needed help carrying stuff over to the table, so you just did it. And so I think a whole lot of this has to do in the way we bring children into this world and the way we socialize them as they're growing up. And so I would see a huge piece of this starting at, when a child is first coming into this world, seeing this as an extraordinary human being who could be, the next Michelangelo or, but her own unique, precious gift. And that if we started viewing each other with, really seeing each other as amazing, amazing human beings and really treating each other with the kind of respect and gratitude that engenders, then I think that we would go a long way. And now I really think, and Alanna's been very helpful recently in this, in 1980, I started developing something I call the best game on earth, which has a goal and 10 rules. It took me 10 years to write them because I was kind of slow and no one gave me tablets, but they work. They really work. I've been playing the game now since 1980, and it's just amazing. And it's now, I've taught it all over the world now, and I see something like the game starting to break out all over the world. I mentioned this in my TEDx talk up in Winnipeg almost 4.5 years ago now. And I really do think that if we have a common set of sort of behaviors that we agree on. I mean, like the game rules are really simple things like speak the truth, acknowledge the truth when others speak it, come from love, respect, and gratitude, leave the trail better than you found it, expect miracles, because if you do the first 4, you get miracles. Do what gives you joy and create joy in what you do. Be generous with who you are and what you have. Be a good friend and teammate. Clean up your messes, learn the lessons, and move on. Don't beat yourself up, but do learn the lessons. And then the final rule is, if you have an idea for how to improve the game, share it. And so just by playing that in an ongoing way, I don't know. It just seems to work, and things show up. I mean, honest to God, the miracles that are showing up in my life now are just, I could go on and on, but I really think we need to get much more observing on our process and self-reflecting. What did I do that worked? What did I do that didn't work so well? And then to be really, really honest in a very loving way with each other. So
Okay,
anyway.
so I think we're going to do that in a minute because we've got to wrap this up. Confirm about Japan. Norie lived there for many years. I was there for just three weeks. I traveled through in 1980, and it was amazing. People kept bicycles on the streets. There was like no theft in Tokyo. It was really a beautiful society. I think it's gone downhill by now. I think it's because of globalism. I think it's because of wealth inequality in Japan. But anyhow, I want to say happy Valentine's Day to everybody.
Valentine's Day.
Love what this is, okay?
Not
And,
that St.
We'll
Valentine
wrap
was,
up and what did you say, Ginger?
not that St. Valentine's was a nice person. 'cause
Oh,
he-
well, that could be another topic.
That's another
Okay, so we'll say goodbye for now.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Have a week, everyone.
You too.
Yes.